and then we will swap over to the actual screen. All right, cool. Cool. So, I am back from dental surgery hell. So, gonna be super honest. I'm still kind of sick, but this just came out. Really want to talk about it. I like to always do some kind of stream every weekend, so I think it's pretty well timed. So we're gonna go over the book, talk about making a team and stuff like that. Give some thoughts on just like initial impressions and stuff like that. I've got some minis on the 3D printer. Looks like 2 of them failed, but we'll get those fixed. I've got some minis on the 3D printer to play this. Hopefully I will get these guys done this week, and we can give this a go next weekend, which will be really cool. This is a miniatures agnostic game, so technically you can play it with anything. But if I'm being super mega honest, I wanted something that didn't like look and feel like Warhammer, right? I wanted a different kind of flavor to the minis for this game, so I printed some new stuff off, which is pretty cool. So, pretty darn sweet. Alrighty. So, what is this? This is a new game from Snarling Badger Studios. This is a game company made by Uncle Adam and Vince Venturella. They put out a new game pretty much every year. If I'm going to be super honest, I played the living hell out of Space Station Zero last year. It was a really fun game. I did multiple videos for it, multiple streams, playthroughs, walked through the book, stuff like that. Really solid, fun game. Really good time. So this just dropped on Friday, so I've been kind of pouring over the rules every time I sit down for like a free minute. I've been going over the rule book. It's pretty cool. This is up on War Game Vault for, I think it's like $19 for the print version and the PDF. I think the PDF by itself is like $10 or something like that. So, pretty good deal getting the print version and the PDF together. That's really nice. I'm looking forward to getting the print version in the mail, but it usually takes a couple weeks. So, in the meantime, I want to go ahead and go over the book, because I figured I could share it with you guys this way, and you guys could still see it, which would be pretty cool. Alright, let me double check. Whoa, okay. Just wanted to make sure everything was still working. I apologize for having to flick back and forth, but single screen, just double checking, you know? Alrighty. So, Majestic13, made by Snarling Badger Studios. This is a minis agnostic, pretty small scale, really like solo or co-op focused war game. There is PvP in here, but sort of the big kind of selling points of this game all seem very focused on solo and co-op, which I am 100% for. I do majority of my games solo here on the channel, right? Like doing streams and stuff. I think that's pretty cool. I think this game also has a lot of really cool potential in co-op, and we'll talk about that as we start getting through it. But yeah, I think this game as co-op could be like a real gem, which is pretty cool. So, alright, so let's start going through it, see what we got. Majestic13, Snarling Badger, there's our stuff. It has a bunch of fluff. You can see the book is pretty nicely laid out. And it's supposed to have this, like, which I think is pretty nice. The intent here is that this is like near future, so like kind of like Spec Ops team sort of thing. And basically all this fluff here goes through and details a shadowy government organization that tries to like hunt down and like control or eradicate aliens. And that's pretty much the big focus of the game. Most of the matches seem, or most of the missions, there are special missions in here that don't fall into this, but most of the missions really seem to be sending your team out to go fight usually like one monster, maybe two monsters. Which is kind of cool. I think there's some interesting play there, and we'll talk about that when we get down to the later parts, but this fluff is all just introducing like the idea of the shadow government organization thing that fights the aliens. It's all decently written. This concept space, there's kind of like a merging of two big concepts here. One is this is an asymmetrical game, right? It's your guys versus like one or two aliens, right? So there is an element of trying to control the aliens, predict what they're doing, and manipulate them, a la something like Monster Hunter or Dark Souls, are kind of like interacting with the system to sort of win, right? I think that's pretty interesting. That space is generally occupied by stuff like, well, Monster Hunter, largely. That asynchronous, not asynchronous, asymmetric. I've got like developing on the brain because I have to go back to work on Monday. Ugh. Yeah, you know what I'm saying. Dental surgery. Yum, it hurts. Yeah, so that's God, I totally lost my track. I so apologize. Jesus Christ. But yeah, so there's two parts to it. One side is that like Monster Hunter part, right? Where you have this asymmetric game where it's your guys versus the aliens, trying to manipulate them, trying to like win by exploiting them and stuff like that. And the other side of it is really kind of like the Men in Black section, where it's this idea of like a government organization sent out to interact with aliens in some regard, right? And there's a couple big players in sort of both these spaces. Monster Hunter in like the hunting one, stuff like Dark Souls, things like that. Things where interacting with the boss mechanic is sort of the game, right? And in the like Spec Ops, Black Helicopters, kind of alien, I want to believe section, right? You have a bunch of different big players. You have things like the X-Files. You have, Ancient Aliens. You have like 1950s pulp. You have a bunch of like different concepts. You have Men in Black, XCOM, right? Like, there's a bunch of different kind of players there, and the story's trying to bring those together. I do think that because the alien like conspiracy theory space is so large, that different people are going to come into this game with different kind of initial mindsets. When I first read this, I was like, oh my god, I want to do like a 1950s like pulp sci-fi game, right? Like that's what really like excited me. I was like, oh yeah, that's really cool. Even though the game's intended to be near future, you could easily do that, right? Someone else might be like, yeah, it's cyberpunk time, let's go, alien technology, guns, pew pew pew, right? So there's a lot of different things that people are going to bring with them going into this space. This tries to define it. It tries to set it as being near future, but it could easily pretty much become whatever you want. Which I think is both a strength and a weakness, right? This game is definitely not as strongly like personified the way Space Station Zero was. Like Space Station Zero, like from the cover, had this like sense of like punk rock and roll space, and it was cool as fuck. The concept here is not as strong, right? That does mean you can very much take it to what you want it to be. Like, if you want this to be pulp, if you want this to be cyberpunk, if you want this to be like, you know, black helicopters, like 90s, like X-Files, I Want to Believe kind of thing, I think you could do that easily. But it does mean it doesn't have like as strong of like a narrative as, say, Space Station Zero does. But we got a whole bunch of stuff going over the narrative. That was a big rambly bit. I apologize. We got a whole bunch of stuff going over the narrative, kind of doing the setup for this government organization called Majestic13. It then goes over everything you need to play. It's a co-op game, yada, yada, yada. I don't know what the hell's going on outside. I'm going to tell you right now, I cannot wait to move to my new house, because all that shit's not going to happen anymore. It's going to be fucking great. I will say there is some really nice, like, you know, old pictures of like flying saucers and stuff. They did a really good job with like the layout on that. It's really nicely done. There is kind of like a Saturday morning, this mentions it here, Force, like a Saturday morning like cartoon villain kind of thing for the alien organization called Force. Whereas they're like, you know, the evil aliens are all combined to be this evil force. But yeah. We had some examples. And it goes over the stats. There are, what, 6, 7 stats? What's it say? Yeah. There's, God, I cannot math today at all. God, I tell you. There's a couple core stats in this game. Combat is rolled together as one stat, which I think is not a bad idea. Combat is rolled together as one stat, and then as your character's stats go up and cross certain thresholds, they're going to get bonuses to these stats that enable them to do special stuff. That's kind of what this section's detailing. You have a dexterity stat, which is a combination of like dodging and movement. You have a fortitude, which is sort of like a toughness stat that sort of enables you to like how well you'll shrug off like conditions and stuff like that. And then there is a psychic stat. And then you're going to have your defense. Your defense is used for calculating how much damage you take. We'll talk about that in a second. The big elephant in the room here is an acuity stat. I'm going to be super honest. I understand why this stat exists. I don't like it. I think it's clunky. The acuity stat is it basically is your like initiative. And I'll talk about why this exists later, because it does factor into the predictability of the battle. Having a static initiative enables you to predict what your guys are going to do and what the enemy is going to do. And there's a lot of value in that, right? When you were trying to build a game around interacting with and exploiting an enemy monster, being able to predict what's going to happen with a stat in like what order is very important. This is kind of the XCOM thing of like, if I move my guy here, then the alien's going to go, and then this guy can shoot him when he runs out because now I'm in Overwatch, and you know, that kind of like mental puzzle. So having a predictive stat that's not really going to fluctuate that much for initiative from turn to turn is very important. Personally, I don't like it. I would rather have it be unpredictable. I'll talk more about that later, but I would rather just not have this stat because I think that it is kind of clunky. But we'll go into that more. But acuity is basically your initiative stat. That's what it is. Acuity is a weird choice of word. I'm not surprised. I'm surprised they didn't just call it initiative or like speed, maybe. But speed, I guess maybe people will be like, oh, that's how fast you move. Ooh, the fucking speed span. I don't know. Alright, you're going to make stat checks. This is a D20 game. The basic... Well, let me back up. This game is Frostgrave and Warcry put together. And I'm going to be super honest. Those are both fantastic games. Frostgrave and Warcry are both amazing games. So when you put them together, you get a pretty good setup. This means that this is a D20 game. There are D6s in here, but this is primarily like a 1 or 2 dice roll per encounter D20 game a la Frostgrave. It does mean that some of the numbers and stuff are pretty high, but generally there are checks in place in this game to make sure you don't have the swinginess of Frostgrave. I like the swinginess of Frostgrave, but I know it is something that a lot of people do not like. That is to say that Frostgrave is a D20 system where you can just get fucking completely smashed and owned in one round. This game has a couple checks in place to sort of prevent that from happening, which I think is pretty good. So you're not just like tabled one shot, kind of like the alien shoots your guy's head off in one turn kind of thing. There are a couple systems in place so that doesn't happen, and I think that's a good call. Part of that is the fact that a lot of the stats are very high. So Warcry, it's the same kind of solution Warcry uses for people getting tabled, right? Like your Warcry guy does like 4 damage in all of his attacks. Oh, the enemy has 6 life, so it gets to survive through more than one turn, right? It's that same kind of concept here, right? Like both the player characters and the aliens have a lot of life, and it does kind of like help prevent that. So that's one of the other methods. But it is a D20 system. You're going to be rolling D20s for everything, which is pretty cool. There's critical successes and failures. That should just always be the case in every game. It fucking triggers the shit out of me when a D20 doesn't do anything special when it's rolled, or a critical 1. I'm just like, why not? Like conceptually, I feel like it should, like it's kind of the fun of the dice. Using a D20 also means that those are going to happen way less than, say, using a D6. Because if you look at something like one-page rules, their critical system is really fun, but it also happens like all the fucking time. So it doesn't feel as special, and it also is like can be pretty devastating. And it happens pretty often if you use their critical rolls, because you are using the D6 versus the D20. So, all right, okay. Actions. Where should we stop? I guess we'll stop here. That's a good one. Okay. So, every time you get to activate a model, and I'll talk about that a little bit more later. Every time you get to activate a model, it's going to get to do a move. It's going to try to get to clear a condition it could have, and it's going to get to do some kind of action. And here's the list of actions. This is a pretty interesting list of actions. It includes like attacking or helping teammates or protecting them, stuff like that. There could be some other stuff in here that could be kind of cool. This is using a single action system, essentially. So you're going to get to move and then do one action. So you're not going to have the variety of, say, the actions you have in a dual action system, like, say, Star Wars Legion. So, for example, in Star Wars Legion, you can have a guy aim and then shoot, and this is just shooting. So it is a simplified kind of version of that, and I don't think that's necessarily bad. I think that's actually pretty good. This is sort of boiling. Oh, excuse me, one second. This is boiling the game down to its like core elements of attacking and moving, and then doing a couple extra things. I think that's pretty good, because the focus of this game is really fighting the aliens. There are secondary objectives and stuff and other things you need to do, but the goal is to kill the alien, right? It's to destroy the monster. It's monster hunting game. So the fact that you kind of like don't have a lot of like fluff, like, you know, raise the banners and stuff like that as actions makes a lot of sense to me personally, because the focus of the game is killing the alien. Alright, so you're gonna get an action plus a movement. You can climb and blah 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 blah, all that kind of normal stuff. Alright, combat. Combat is a D20 system, as I mentioned. So how do you do this? You take your combat stat, you take your D20 roll, you put them together, pen, apple, pen, okay? And that is your roll. Does that roll beat the enemy defense? If yes, you get to inflict damage. If no, well, then you just fucking shot the ground or something. This is akin to the Frostgrave comparative dice rolling system, but the enemy doesn't roll the dice, right? So this is sort of like one-sided. I do this, it does this to you. Since you're fighting an AI, I don't think that's particularly bad. I think that's perfectly fine. I think that removes an unnecessary dice roll from an AI, right? Like if I was playing another player, I would want there to be another dice roll, because I want them to feel like they have some kind of initiative in the game, an initiative in the end result. Or some kind of like stake in the end result. But since you're playing against an AI alien here, I don't want that, right? Like, I think it's perfectly fine that I just inflict damage to it, right? I think that's perfectly fine. It is going to strike back in the same way, but again, I think just simplifying it out overall, I think is a good call. So yeah. So if I can shoot them, I can shoot them. Let's see. Oh, really nice. Really nice. Your combat stat is your combat stat, right? So that means that how do I sum this up? So it means, like, if you have a rifle, you know, this rifle can shoot all over the board, right? Like, the board's not that big, right? Like, rifles shoot for, like, really far distances in real life. It's not going to be a thing like, my gun shoots 6 inches and then doesn't do damage, right? That's not a thing. It's just, if you have line of sight, you can shoot. I think that's really good. I think that's a nice simplification. I think that's pretty cool. All right. Critical hits, conditions. There are conditions that can occur to you. These are nicely created. They did a good job creating these. I do wish there was one more, but we'll talk about that in a second. Basically, these are just like effects that can happen to your guys as you're fighting the alien, right? You can get like stunned, or you can get like covered in a tiny net, or blinded, or whatever. And they're pretty cool. These effects, the really nice thing about these is that they don't ever stop you. They don't ever stop you from interacting, right? The way every one of these stats is created, They have some impact on your character. Your character is more likely to fail stuff, or it might suck at doing one thing, but it's never stopped from interacting in some way, right? It can always still have an action. This isn't like the stun system in Grimdark Future Firefight, where your guy just loses an activation, or like the pin system in Bolt Action. You're not losing your ability to interact with the situation. This is particularly important because a lot of this game is predicting the alien and predicting its interaction, and like losing something like that would suck. So I'm really happy that none of these prevent you from interacting in some way. They just make you worse at doing certain things. I think this is a really nice way to do these. The one that I believe is missing from this is burning. There's no burning condition list. And honestly, I think, a guy being lit on fire by an alien, I think makes a lot of sense, like conceptually. You think about like the burning cows running around from Mars Attacks or something like that, right? And there's also, it could just take a little bit of damage every turn, right? There's a condition removal step when you activate a model, so it would make sense. So I do think burning is missing from this list, but this is a really cool way to do conditions without them interacting with like your play, essentially. Alright, let's see. There is cover in the game. Some enemies can disappear and they can surprise you. Ooh, alien head. Alright. Now we're down to creating our teams. How do I... So, before you create your team, right? I talked about the ideas of the Monster Hunter and the Men in Black kind of ideas coming together. You kind of really need to determine how you're going to theme your team, because there are so many different ways to do the shadowy government organization Men in Black thing. You need to decide that from the onset, right? This game tries to theme it for near future, so guys with M4s that shoot lightning bullets or whatever the fuck, right? However, you can pretty much theme this for whatever you want. So if you wanted to do World War II guys, you could do that. If you wanted to do Mulder and Scully, you could do that. Stuff like that. But you need to kind of come up with that idea really before you start working through this list, and just kind of get it in your head. For me, that means I've been poring over STLs because I really wanted something, because I have tons of Warhammer stuff, right? Some little dudes there. Here's some Skaven Caldor, right? I do so much Warhammer stuff on this channel. I really wanted something that wasn't Warhammer flavored. So I've been just pouring through STLs. So one of the big companies I'm going to call out, and this is the one that I actually have these on the printer right now, right over here. We kind of Ghost in the Shell type cyberpunk models, and they're fucking great. I don't know how else to put it. These are awesomely cool models. Just cool stuff. Really power armors, a guy with a big bazooka, really cool sci-fi stuff, right? There's a guy some kind of gangbanger with a hyena robot dog. I bought this thing. This thing is going to be a member of my team because it's just too cool. I'll go over that in a second. But this thing's going to be part of my team, right? So kind of the world is your oyster here of what you really want for your guys. So the two big characters for sort of my team, I wanted to do cyberpunk Mulder and Scully. We'll get to you in a minute, buddy. So I got these two from Unit 9, right? So they're going to be like the two main characters, and then I'm going to have like two other support guys and the robot dog. And that's going to be my team, right? So I'm going to try to go for the like Ghost in the Shell, cyberpunk kind of thing, because I think that's pretty cool. And that look is a look I don't often paint miniatures for, right? So like these are going to be a mix of like really bright colors and like black contrasting, so I'm going to try to really go for that like neon hell what is the name of that show where the guy is trying to find the robots and it's Tears in the Rain? Oh god, what is the name of that? Ugh, it's going to drive me bonkers. I am totally blanking on it. But yeah, I'm really trying to go for that kind of like cyberpunky look. So one of the first things you really need to come up with like the theme for your team, right? Like you could easily use bolt action minis. That's what I was going to do at first. But honestly, I couldn't find very good pulp style aliens. Because I wanted to do like really like Mars attacks, like with like the big brains and the jars and stuff. I like flying saucers and stuff. Like I really wanted to do that, but I couldn't really find good pulp style alien STLs. There's a couple out there, but I really didn't find like the variety that I wanted. So I decided to go the cyberpunk route. I'm going to do Ghost in the Shell instead. So creating your team. Your team is made up of 5 guys. Each one of these guys is going to have randomly determined stats, and then they're going to get equipment. Your boss, there's also one boss model in the team. This is your quote-unquote commander. And he just gets to like pick his stats essentially. So he's a model that you have a little bit more control over. Because instead of just doing completely random, like, I roll for my stats, you roll for them, but then you also get to pick the result you want. So, you're going to get a base stat account of 5s for basically everything, except for Psychic. And then you're going to roll 2d6 and add that to that stat. On average, this means that all of your guys' stats will be about 11 as an average. This does mean you could roll really poorly and have shitty team members. I think that's okay. These stats, they're really only used for stat checks. You're not like, for example, rolling on how much life your guy has or what his defense is. These are kind of like static things that are already preset. Your defense is set at 30, and I don't remember what your life is, but it's pretty much preset already. Let's see. Hit points are equal to your fortitude plus 15, right? So you're by default automatically going to have some value in there for 15, right? Or 20. You're going to have by default 20 hit points plus whatever else you get added to it. So on average, you're going to have 26 hit points, right? And your defense is set as a default at 30. The defense being so high is one of those things that I talked about. That is it's a agent of control for preventing the swinginess of D20s. That's what this is, and I think that's fair. I think that's a fair system. I think it's good. It's gonna help you prevent. It's gonna help prevent you from like getting just hammered constantly. Your defense being so high. All right, so once you have your 5 guys, including your commander, you're going to pick a faction. There are 13 factions in the Majestic13. 13 factions is a lot. I think in theory, these are trying to help you theme your team, right? But they also have stat bonuses. So I would pretty much, personally, I'm going to choose the one with stat bonuses that I think match what I want, how I want my team to play, right? So like some of these, they might give you additional fortitude. Some of them might make you have an extra psychic guy. Some of them give you just like defense. You can clear conditions easier. You can get equipment easier. There is like a there's one that like helps you prevent bad events from occurring during the game. There's a bunch of different ones in here, and they all do have little descriptions. And I'm trying to pick my words because I like a lot of the stat effects on these, but some of the descriptions are just stupid. I don't know how else to say it. They're just dumb. It's like, oh, this one's made out of doctors. It's like there's one that's like made out of farmers. It's like that's not. I don't know. I kind of wanted I wanted more like. I wanted more like kind of crazy, like out there, like Illuminati kind of themes to these. I feel like the themes on a lot of these are kind of lame, and not super inspiring. So I'm pretty much just gonna pick the ones that I think give me the best benefits. Like the 1% is a thing, right? Like it's like. Yeah. All right. So after you pick your stats for your team, you're going to pick your faction, and then you're going to pick your advantage. Your advantage, this is very similar to Space Station Zero. It just gives you some kind of buff for all of your team guys, right? In theory, this would help you play into like a specific role, right? Like my guys are super attacky, or my guys are more defendery, or they negate some specific function of the game, right? Like they're better at I think there's one that's like better at spotting hidden enemies, or like the hidden enemies are just always visible, something like that, right? They give you some kind of just flat out advantage to your team. They're pretty cool. I do want to call out Armored Team because it's fucking OP as shit, especially compared to some of the other things where it's just flat out better than they are. So with Armored Team, everybody gets body armor for free, and it's increased by additional 1 damage reduction. There's a thing in here that just reduces incoming damage by 1. Yeah, reinforced normal layering. Armored Team is just flat out better than this, so there's no reason to take that one. There are a couple things like that in this game where some things are just flat out better than others, but there's not many, right? Like that's a very small like error. It's not a big deal. But I do just want to call out that there are a couple things like that in here that have stood out to me. I'm just like, why would I ever take A when B exists? You know what I mean? But these are kind of cool. Some of these, they make your guys a little bit faster. Your guys get some extra gear. They get extra defense. They're pretty good. All right, now there's stuff on Psychic. It's basically just like a Psychic phase. It's kind of neat. I don't super plan on using a Psychic team, so I haven't really read into the Psychic stuff because I don't intend to use a Psychic team, so. Alright, now you're going to get some equipment. So everybody's going to get a weapon, and then your team is going to get 3 pieces of gear in addition to that weapon. And those 3 pieces of gear can be split out between your team, which is pretty cool. Alright, now there are a bunch of different weapons and stuff. Some of these I'm a little confused by. So let me just kind of get into it. So a pistol is worse than a rifle, but a pistol doesn't require two hands. So I could then, in theory, have things like tracking beacons, a taser, or a flashbang. But every time I attack, I have to pick one of those. But like, if my guy has a rifle, shouldn't he be able to like throw a grenade? You know what I mean? Like that thing, you know, put the gun down, shoo, right? Like, so it seems a little weird. So if your guy has a weapon that uses two hands, he can't use other weapons. So I think that means you can't have things like grenades and stuff if you have a two-handed weapon, which is kind of weird. I'm not super sure how that's going to work out, because I mean, you'd have to have like a pistol and a grenade, right? Like that's a little weird, but you know, it's just an oddity there. I do want to give big props for the fact that they expanded out the number of weapons here from Space Station Zero. Pretty much my only complaint about Space Station Zero was the fact that there just weren't enough variety in the weapons. There's a lot more variety here, which is really good. There's a big heavy machine gun, there's a grenade launcher, there's a sniper rifle. It's pretty good. I would have liked to have seen a shotgun, an explosive grenade that does damage, and a flamethrower. Those are the three that are missing from this. One, there are instances where you are going to be fighting more than one alien, so having an explosive grenade would be really nice. There is no shotgun in here. Technically, you could just say it's very similar to the battle rifle, but I think you could come up with a cool, different effect. Like maybe the shotgun knocks things back, right? So if you think about like Colonial Marines, right? Like they've got their machine gun with the grenade launcher in the bottom, and then, you know, Hicks has his shotgun, you know, like I think there's a difference there in weapons. So I would have liked to have seen that. I would have liked to have seen an explosive grenade, a shotgun, and I would have liked to have seen a flamethrower. Because a flamethrower for fighting aliens is like the quintessential weapon. I think there really should have been some kind of flamethrower here. I think that would have been really cool. And if you're going to add the burning condition, I feel like it would have added some cool stuff there. You know, light the alien on fire. You know, it takes ticking burning damage. I think that's pretty cool. I would have liked to have seen that in here. But besides that, this is a lot more weapons than what we had in Space Station Zero, so that's pretty good. But like I said, I would have liked to have seen those three things. You will notice there are quote-unquote Phase 2 things. Essentially, there is like a tipping point in the game where the game gets harder, and you have the option to have different stuff. So this is going to be like other extra equipment, usually more like alien-y equipment. All the aliens and stuff after the phase changes get harder and stuff too, so it's not like you're gonna, you now have the Phase 2 stuff, you can breeze through all the aliens previously. No, they all just got harder as well. But there is quote-unquote Phase 2 stuff here, and it's kind of cool. Alright, there is armor gear, medical gear, what is that? Stuff for like detecting people. There's a thermometer. There is stuff in here like drones and stuff like that, which is pretty cool. And basically all the other gear, you do get to keep 3 pieces of it and give it out to your team. There is a medical bag a la Space Station Zero, so I will 100% be taking that so I can have a medic. There is also like sniper scopes and like proximity detectors and drones and body armor and stuff like that. So, you know, there's a good variety of stuff that's there. I didn't really see anything that I would have really liked to have had added to that list. I think what we see is pretty good in that list. So, Yeah, so there's some pretty good stuff in that list. Alright, so you're going to pick your guy's stats. You're going to pick the faction they're from. You're going to pick their advantage. You're going to pick their gear. For gear, everybody gets 1 weapon and then 3 pieces of starting gear for the entire team that you split out between them. And then you pick a base. I love picking bases. I don't know why, but something in my brain just loves picking bases, right? I love this in Frostgrave. Like every game that lets me pick a base, I just love. Like I'm not like it's just like I love picking bases. It's one of those like things that just like tickles me pink in a game. I don't know why, but it does. So you're gonna pick a base. Each base gives you some kind of benefit. A lot of these affect post-game stuff because they're your base and not out on the field, which makes a lot of sense. So there's a bunch of different bases, which is pretty cool. All right. Now every base can also be upgraded at a certain amount of times. Sorry, I have been talking for very long, and as a person that had dental surgery and then got super mega sick, give me 1 second. We're taking a little more of that ibuprofen. All right, so I can get through this because I am very excited about this game and want to talk about it. So there's a bunch of different base expansions, which is pretty cool, right? Like weapon depots, cloning facilities, training areas, drone control pads, satellites, bunch of different stuff in here. You can get human resources. Bunch of different stuff, which is pretty cool. There's benefits, those bonuses are cool. I am a big sucker for games that have base building and like getting passive upgrades to your base, which is pretty cool. So I think that's really exciting and neat. Okay. Starting a mission. There's some stuff in here I really love and some stuff in here I really don't like. So first off, you're going to pick a geography, then you're going to roll for your terrain, you're going to roll for your enemy, you're going to roll for your bureaucracy, which is either some kind of benefit or negative that's going to impact the mission. Like maybe your guys didn't get all their supplies, or maybe they got wrong intel, the enemy's actually stronger than it was supposed to be, stuff like that. I think the bureaucracy thing is really cool. We'll go into that in a second. Then you're going to have your secondary objectives. These are really nice. I'll talk about that. We'll go look at those in a second. I'll talk about them. And you're going to roll for your FUBAR event. This is something that happens at the start of every turn. So what you do is you roll a d6 and then add the turn number to it. This is interesting in some ways, and it has some drawbacks. This is one of the things I don't particularly like, and we'll talk about that in a second. And then you can pick your aid, so your guys can like call and support during the mission. So this could be anything like calling in a drone strike or evacuating or a bunch of different stuff. All right. So co-op games, how to play skirmish games. In co-op games, you literally just have 2 aliens and 2 teams. And I think we'll talk about that at the end, but I think that's where the magic of this game it really is. All right, enemy AI. We'll talk about you in a minute. I want to see the tables for the mission. Okay. All right. Mission setup. First thing you're going to do is pick a geography. That's either going to be wilderness or urban. These basically give you like benefits and negatives to the situation. I think this is fine. I don't think there's anything bad here. I do tend to, when I play, want to play on specific tables, right? So honestly, what I would probably do is set up my table and then pick the one of these that matches it, right? So it's, oh, we're in the wilderness. Oh, we're in a confined space urban thing, right? So I would probably pick the one of these that matches my table more than rolling for it. Because when I play, I tend to be like, man, I really want to use my meat trees today, or I really want to use my boarding action stuff today, right? Like, I usually want to play on a specific table, so I would just basically pick the one that matches my specific table. Well, which brings me to my biggest complaint about setting up the mission thing, and this is terrain. Please, War Games, stop dictating how I set up my terrain. Please, like, for real. I'm so fucking tired of this. It's not interesting. It doesn't add anything interesting to the game that, oh, you put 2 clumps of terrain in one corner. It's like, I'd rather make a cool looking table. So just, like, for real, please stop doing this. Like, Warcry does this, and it's literally the worst thing about Warcry. So yeah, so the game wants you to cordon up your table, and then it's going to tell you what to put in each part of the table. I'm never going to do this. When you see me do Let's Plays for this game, I'm just going to skip this step because this is fucking stupid. Any game that tells you how and where and when and why to set up your terrain is stupid. I understand competitive games need to have specific set layouts so that they're fair. This is not a competitive game. This is a co-op and solo game. So just please stop telling me how to set up my terrain. Alright. Yeah, yeah, fuck off, terrain. Alright, so next we're going to pick an enemy. This is pretty cool. There are a whole bunch of different enemies. And I think this is one of the game's strongest suits. I think this is like one of the big magic parts of this game is the variety of enemies. We'll talk about these later because I want to talk about the enemies as a whole because I think they're more interesting if we talk about them as a whole. So, alright, so we're going to skip over those a little bit and we're going to go over to bureaucracy. This is a cool modifier that's added to the mission that doesn't directly impact the play of the round, but it impacts the mission. I think this is super. I think this is a really nice addition. I actually wish way more war games had something similar to this, because it just adds a little bit of a flavor to the match, without causing it to have some specific in-round occurrence. I think that's pretty cool. And there's a whole bunch of stuff here. You can see, like, you randomly showed up in the wrong drop zone. Decrease all stats except defense of the alien by 3. Your team has a really rough landing. Maybe your ship gets shot down or something. Like, you take 1d6 damage. Like, there's some cool shit there. Secondary objectives. These are fantastic. Whoever came up with these, +1. These are really cool, right? So, your main goal of this is to kill the alien, right? Like, you know, you have the big alien. It's a big robot monkey. Ah, right? That's the goal of the mission, right? All the other stuff is secondary. So the really nice thing of these is they kind of happen automatically as you move around the board. There's never any specific actions you need to do or anything you have to give up to complete these. And I think that is extremely important and extremely well done, because it means that you can kind of pick at these as you're playing without having to focus on them, right? Like, you don't have to send a guy over who's now not going to be able to hurt the alien because he has to push a button, right? That isn't the situation that you're in here. So I think that's really good. Super, super good. Whoever did these are fantastic. Really nice. They add a nice bit to the game, or at least I think they're going to when I play. I haven't gotten to play yet, but I think they're going to add a lot to the game. All right. The FUBAR events. One, just write the word fucked, please. Please. Just write the word fucked. It's like when you read a comic and they use like fake made up like, you know, cuss words like frack and stuff. Like, you know, Fubar is fucked up beyond all recognition. So the fact that they're using it as fouled up beyond, it just, I don't know. It triggers something in my brain now. I'm like, just use the word, please. This is weird. Please stop. So just use the word fucked. This is an event in the mission that could potentially happen at every turn that has some effect on the mission. These are okay. I like the concept of these. My problem with these is that there is not enough variety here, right? We're looking at, what, 7 events? One of which is only going to happen on a 13. You're looking at 7 events, and most of these are just punishment. So if you have your guys and they're doing their mission and they're doing good, and one of these happens, chances are this is just punishment. And it's usually not interaction in an interesting way that will make the game more interesting. It's usually just punishment. So for example, a 1 to 7 is civilians. What do civilians do? Do you place a bunch of civilian minis on the board and now you can't shoot through them because they're like moving targets? They're getting in the way of you fighting the alien? No, that's not what they do. They literally just prevent you from getting a bonus. That's all they do, right? They prevent you. It's like if you roll a Fubar event and you roll a 1 through 7, you just get less rewards for beating the mission. That's not fun. That's not interesting. That's literally just punishment. A couple of these are cool. Things like aliens spawning or terrain collapsing, stuff like that. One of these is actually good, which is weird. But majority of these are they're just some kind of punishment. Like the Sun and Storm, right? All models now have a line of sight of 12 inches. That's not particularly interesting, right? It's just making the game worse. So I'm not a super big fan of these Fubar events. I think this is a cool idea, but I think the events that are presented here are not. They aren't as cool as they should be, right? Like the civilian ones should be you place a bunch of civilian models and now they're moving line of sight blockers because you can't shoot the alien because fucking some fat dude with his groceries like me is walking in front of the way, right? Like, I think that's you know how it is. So these should be cool events, but I think the events presented are kind of lame. All right, and this is giving you the stuff that your guys can call for aid for. Calling for aid is just an action. You can do it once per game. There's some cool stuff you could do, like drone strikes, and you can evac and stuff like that. Okay, and now you end a mission. We're gonna scroll through those. All right, where is it? Come on. All right, yeah, we'll talk about these in a minute. All right, yeah. Okay. Now, when you end a mission, this is a campaign-style game. Let me check everything real quick. All right, cool. This is a campaign-style game, so that means that your guys are going to carry over from one mission to another. This does mean there is an injury table and stuff that you're going to roll on if your guys are taken out of action. Chromosomal damage. Oof. Your guys can be recloned if they die. And they can increase in experience, and they can gain extra bonuses and stuff. There's some cool stuff here. All this is kind of standardy kind of stuff for like a campaign game, right? Like usually you have a table where you roll where see what your guys if they died or not, and then usually you get some kind of bonuses and stuff, and then you get some rewards, which is pretty cool. This is all kind of like standardy kind of stuff. I think it's all pretty good. Your guys can pick additional equipment, everything. You get a free base upgrade every time. So generally every mission you're going to be getting a bunch of shit, which is pretty darn cool, right? Now your team rating is going to go up. There are bureaucracy modifiers that happen as well. Is there anything else? Okay, yeah, we'll talk about those in a second. All right. Now, your team rating is going to go up if you win. This is a cool system. This is sort of the original Warcry 1.0 campaign system with a more logical progression tree. So, as your team goes up, you are going to unlock and have to run special missions. I think this is pretty dope. A bunch of these special missions are really neat. They are things like ambushes, or like you're fighting big hunts, or you have specific, unique, new monsters you have to fight. There's some really cool stuff in these special missions. There's a whole bunch of them, and it also gives you like a finale to the campaign. That like, you know, you can just keep playing with your dudes after that if you want to. You don't have to stop. But I think this is cool because it does give you some sense of like actual progression to the game, right? You're like, oh, okay, so we beat this one. Oh, next time we should play the campaign special one, right? I think this is cool. I think it's a nice way to do it. It is the Warcry 1.0 campaign system, except Warcry 1.0 did it after a specific set of missions, so regardless of whether or not you were ready for it, they forced you to play it, and then you would kind of get stuck in the cycle of having to play that mission again and again and again. And I think that's kind of lame, but this system, because it is based on your team rating, the missions can get harder. And stuff, and they can give you bigger challenges. This is kind of like a breakpoint system. If you think about something like Path of Exile. Path of Exile is a very good example of this. As you reach certain points in that game, you're going to run through like a gauntlet where you fight a boss at the end. And every time you do that, it makes you stronger, and you like advance things, right? And you unlock new stuff. Very cool system. This is very similar system to that. So I think this is cool. I like the campaign of this a lot. I like the rewards and stuff you're going to get. I think it's going to be, as a campaign system, really fun. I think it's going to be pretty dope. Okay. So that brings us to what I think is the big showstopper of this. And that's the monstrosities. So these are... or that's the aliens. Yep. Sorry, we gotta go all the way to the top. I have to find a page. I'm sorry. All right, let's see. 61. All right. This is a big book. I think this is the biggest book that Smiling Badger Studios ever made. Because there's a lot of stuff in this game. Like, this is a pretty full game, and it's really good. Okay. Enemy AI. So, this game splits all the aliens into 3 different categories. Monstrosities, Ravagers, and Stalkers. So basically you have like a stealth-focused one, a range-focused one, and a melee-focused one. From what I can tell, I haven't read through every single alien profile, but that's kind of like how my brain has clumped them together, which I think is pretty cool. So, you are going to have a AI system for each one of those types of enemies. And I think this is really cool. I think it could maybe be presented a little better. I think this is a little wordy and a lot to take in on the first game. But I think this is a really cool system, right? So you're going to pick an alien and let's say it's a monstrosity, right? This monstrosity is going to have specific things that it does versus, say, the other kinds of aliens. So, like, if you have a monstrosity, it's going to behave different from a stalker. This is going to include when it takes all of its actions, what kind of reactions it does, when it, like, goes berserk, which is pretty cool. They call it in extremis. It's basically like a berserk state. It's basically like the monster's dying and falling apart. Alien is dying and falling apart. And it's trying to just, like, claw your guys apart or, like, blow them apart or something, right? Like, it's going berserk. The in extremis thing, I'll talk about that later, but it's like a berserk mode, essentially. And this AI activation thing, it just basically tells you everything of how the alien's going to behave. It's essentially like a big flowchart, which is pretty cool. It's like, if A, yes. If A, yes. If A, yes. This is a... This is not an if... Or let me rephrase that. This is not an if-else flow. This is an if. Because a lot of these are individual. So your alien can be an extremist, and it can be within certain ranges and stuff like that, right? So it's one of the reasons I think this probably could be presented a little better, because it's not, if one is true, then you're golden, right? Then job done, right? It's no, if one is true, okay. Is 2 true? I don't know. Is 3 true? I don't know. Is 4 true? I don't know. 5 true? 6 is true, right? That's how this tree works. So I think it probably could be presented a little better, but I really like the idea of this, and I like that it dictates that the monsters are... The different kind of aliens really are going to behave differently. I think that's pretty cool. All right. Now that we talked about the AI, let's go talk about the actual monsters. Because there's a lot of monsters. Okay. We're going to pick the Hellion Beam Chaser. That's one we're going to focus on right there. There are a lot of freaking monsters in this. Aliens, sorry. And that's fucking cool. It's really cool. The variety of the aliens here is really neat. And they do have different effects, right? Like this one is resistant to energy, and he has a heat aura where he's just going to be like hurting the enemies around him. And he has specific actions that he's going to take. Which is pretty cool, right? Like you get something like 30 monsters in this, right? Like, holy shit! You'd have to in theory play 30 games fighting every single monster, not even counting the unique monsters and the special missions to see them all. That's pretty cool, right? That's really fucking cool. And they do different stuff that has all kinds of different effects. So, for example, this guy has a Hellion Blast or a Helioblast. Let's see what that does. He makes 2 attacks with it. It does a shit ton of damage. And if you get hit with it, you have to make a dexterity check or you're blinded. Right? And then he does a wave of heat. Let's see what that does. That can stun people. All kinds of cool stuff, right? Like, he has a bunch of cool rules and stuff that this alien can do. And there are 30 different of these. 30 of them. Plus what's in the special missions. So special missions have special aliens in them. Or at least the ones that I've read have had special aliens in them. That's fucking cool. And they do different shit, right? So there's a lot of cool variety in here. And you can see they get tougher when your team moves into phase 2 in the campaign, which is even cooler, right? So you can see this guy goes from 110 hit points to 160. You can see his defense goes up. Oh, like all of his stats go up, right? That's pretty cool, right? So he has some advantage, that he has some, not advantage, he has some progression there, and he's got a whole bunch of different abilities. And honestly, so let me take a step back. My brain wants everything to be part of a set, right? Like, conceptually, I love games that make you fight a whole variety of different aliens and monsters and stuff. You know, you go in the battle mission, and there's like, you know, there's a gelatinous slime, and you're fighting some kobolds, and I think that's really cool. But my brain really wants it to be part of a set, and that's just probably me being autistic as hell. But so like when I first read this, I was like, oh god, they're all so varied and stuff. It's gonna be so hard to pick models for. And you know, as I thought about it some more, I was like, you know what? No, this is actually really cool. This means I can print out 30 different aliens and paint up 30 different aliens without having to worry about them being like part of a team or something like that, right? Like, I can just go and pick 30 different models, 3D print them up, and be like, yeah, fuck yeah, this thing's a Hellion, this thing's a Gel Blaster, or whatever the fuck, right? Like, I think that's cool as shit, right? And initially I was like, oh god, I wish they were all just like, you know, one set of aliens. But that was just me being dumb, right? This really is super cool, and it's a really fun opportunity for modeling that I think is really cool. Speaking of which, let's talk about some aliens. Well, I've got this guy on the printer right now. This is probably the first alien I'm going to fight, because I'm going to try to have my team done and aliens done by next week. So this is going to be the first alien I'm going to fight. It's freaking cool, right? This is a variant of the aliens from the War for Tomorrow or whatever. The movie with Star-Lord where he like goes into the future to fight aliens. This is a variant of those. It's really fucking cool. Papascal's here. This is the miniature maker for these. He has a ton of great STLs. Like, there's a literal alien. There's some kind of big cyber armor. Here's the cops from RoboCop. There's a literal Queen Alien. If you wanted some Stargate flavor, there you go. He has a ton of amazing... No, I don't want to see the Stargate guy. He has a ton of amazing STLs for both your team and for aliens. So, like, I don't know what that's supposed to be from, but it's cool as shit, right? If you needed a bunch of Force Troopers for this game, print a couple of those out. Like, so yeah, so tons of cool aliens at this guy. There's Kane from fucking RoboCop 2. There's the Ed 209 from the RoboCop remake. They're not all... I'd buy that for $1 guy. I have that STL. They're not all things from famous movies. Like, here's a Predator that's also Yakuza. All right, look at those. That's creepy as fuck. Look at that. Yeah, it's creepy as fuck. All right, like, that would make a great alien. All right, like, there's a ton of good stuff here. I've got this printed out. We'll use him as an alien. Like there's an absolute ton of good stuff here. And I mean, there's here we'll go look at the ones I already saved. There's all kinds of cool stuff, right? Like look at this thing. Look at this thing. All right, we'll open this up. We'll open this guy up. All right, we'll open this guy up. Good stuff, right? There's some cool. All right, no, I don't want to. No, I wanted you to get another tab. So I want to look at this. Look at that thing, right? How cool is that? That's so freaking cool. It's some kind of like darkness stalker. Look, you can like have it made out of stars. Like if you needed a stalker alien, look at that thing, man. That's fucking wicked. That's so cool, right? And then like, look at this thing. What is this? Like some it looks like a ermine that like just like its face exploded. Right? Or look, how cool is that, right? I'm going to print out a bunch of these. They're awesome. Right? Look at it's a cybernetic Anubis. That's cool as shit. I got my guy shooting that, right? Or the aliens from Independence Day. Right? Like, oh man, there's so many cool things. Right? Like, so the 30 different aliens that you could have, right? Like I was at first kind of bummed about that. But it's really cool. It's really exciting. Hellion Blaster, right? Like, it's really cool and it's pretty exciting, right? So, what I would probably do for this game is every time I play a game, I would probably roll up the next mission, and then I could find a mini, print it, paint it, in time for the next mission, right? I can be like, okay, this time I got the Gel Brute. All right, I want to find an alien that looks like a Gel Brute, and I would go and look it up, right? So for my first game, I'm probably going to pick an alien, but every game after that, that's my plan, right? Like that's my headspace on this game, is to roll my mission up, and then find an alien and treat it like this really fun like hobby roulette. And at the end, if you play 30 missions, you could potentially have 30 different aliens, have this really cool, crazy, varied like rogues gallery of bizarre ass aliens. I think that's really cool. So I just wanted to show off some of the cool ones that I found that I thought were really neat. So no, thank you. Okay, so the aliens are very varied, which is cool, very exciting. All right, so little recap before I start talking about the big concepts of this game. All right, little bit of recap. This is a miniatures agnostic skirmish game featuring a hybrid of Warcry and Frostgrave combat, with a campaign system and a focus on solo and co-op gameplay, where you hunt big aliens and you're the Men in Black. That's a really fun setup. Like I said, there are some things in here that I don't really like it telling me how to set up my terrain. I'm just not going to do that. Or stuff like the FUBAR events, I think those are just dumb. I think they could be really fun, but I think the ones that are in the options are just dumb. Or at least most of them are just dumb. Or let me rephrase that, just punishment. And I don't think punishment is fun, right? I'm not that big of a sadist, or is that a masochist? I don't know. Right? I don't worship Slanesh. So I do think there are a couple problems like that. There are some very minute things, like I wish there was a flamethrower. I think there are some errors where it's like, well, if A exists, why would you take B? Stuff like that. But those are all like drops in the bucket, right? This is very cool. And the idea of having all of these monsters to fight is really neat, right? I think that's super exciting, and can give you a really cool like game concept, right? I think this is very fun as a concept, and I think it's going to be really fun to play. That being said, I think the real magic this game has is in co-op. Now, one, everything is always more fun when you do it with a partner. Masturbation says hello. Right? Like, it's always more fun to do things with a partner than it is to play by yourself. But the really neat thing is going to be having two different aliens doing their jams at the same time, right? Like, it's going to be interesting to fight one of these aliens, but if you have one that is like a sniper, and you have one that's like a guy that's going to try to sneak up and stab you in the back, that's a really cool dynamic, right? Or you have one that's like a psychic that's going to be like making your guys like stunned all the time, and then you have one that's like maybe a melee powerhouse, right? Like, the combination of having two different aliens is really neat, and it's going to produce some effects that are going to be hard as fuck to beat, and I think that's really exciting and really interesting. You are also going to have 10 dudes to do it, which is kind of cool. So the idea of doing like co-op games of this is awesome, right? And I think just really fun like interaction in those systems, right? Because these systems are interesting, and it's going to be really fun to be like, okay, I know the alien's going to do A this turn. I go first. It goes. I go. It goes. It goes. It goes. Like that, right? Like, you're going to know all the pieces of the puzzle, right? Like, there's no unknowns that can interrupt your plan here, right? It can set your plan back a little bit, but nothing's going to kneecap your plan. So, like, as you try to manipulate the alien and get it to, and defeat it, that's really interesting. And I think that gets way more interesting when you have two aliens that both do different shit. I think that's really cool. I am a little bit afraid that controlling the aliens is going to suck for the first game, because they are so varied. But I do really like the idea of this and of the different moving pieces, and that like crazy variety actually being the aliens and the potentially the interaction between the aliens. I think that's really cool. Yeah, so I think co-op is like, I think as a co-op game, this is going to be a shining star that's going to be really fun. I think it's going to be pretty good as a solo game, but like, I think this is going to be super boss as a co-op game. I think that's really cool. I think that's really, really cool. Yeah. So, let's see what we got. There is a rules summary in the back, which is really nice. So there is a rules summary in the back. There is a... I know it's in here somewhere. There's like a roster sheet for your team somewhere in this book too. So you can print it out and like write your team in there. That is going to be important because your guys are going to have varied stats and stuff. So something to consider there. Mathematically, there is one problem with this game that I think might be an issue. There are a couple systems I think that work can work against each other in pretty negative ways. That is the limited turn number. So when you're designing co-op games, one of the ways to add pressure to the player so they don't just like completely like fart around. One of the ways to add pressure to the player is to add a time limit. Because you want them to get in there, get into the action, smash those heads. You want them to do that, right? You don't want them to like skirt away from the alien every turn so it never reaches them, kind of thing. However, because there is a time limit, it means that this game could potentially generate missions that are unbeatable. What do I mean by this? You have 5 turns. That means your team of 5 guys, assuming none of them ever die, you're going to have 25 potential actions throughout the course of a game. Those 25 actions, if everyone is armed with a battle rifle, which is like the standard weapon, that does 2d6 damage, that's potentially on average 6 damage per activation, right? So you're looking at what, 150 potential damage on average, right? That's enough to kill most of the monsters. Just flat out, it's enough to kill them. So on average, if you can do every single activation with every single guy, you will usually kill the monsters. Now, you could totally miss, which would reduce that. You could totally screw your roll and have way less damage, or you could have way more damage. So you could have like 1 damage or 12 damage. So there is a lot of variety in there. But there are situations where an extra monster can spawn, right? There is a bureaucracy event where you can spawn 2 monsters. Now, normally let me rephrase that. You would have to get lucky to be able to win that situation, just because of the pure average numbers of math going into it. Now, this is not the case if the game was unlimited in length. But because it is not, it means that there is a certain amount of damage per turn that you have to do. I think that is probably a drawback. The limited turn things, right? Like, I understand why you have it, because you really want people to get stuck in. But I do think that it can produce situations where you just can't win. And I do think it produces situations where the player feels like they always have to attack because they are essentially on a clock of attacks. Total activations per damage per stuff, right? Like, and this is where the extremist system comes in, right? This is the berserk system where once they take a certain amount of damage, they go crazy and start doing more damage. And they also start taking damage, right? So this system is designed to try to produce like a crescendo, right? Like the explosion of the volcano at the end where the monster's just like cleaving people down, but it's also taking damage. Like, it's trying to produce that effect, right? And that's interesting. I think that's really interesting. I think it'd be very interesting to have 2 monsters, have one being an extremist and one not. I think there's like a lot of really cool play that could happen there. But it's trying to, it's trying to even out the number of damage per activation that you have. If that makes sense, right? That's why the monster takes damage in Extremis. And it's kind of interesting, but it is sort of a side effect of it being a certain number of turns, right? Because they really don't want a situation where you flubbed like 2 rolls and your monster that has 150 life is down to like 5 wounds, right? And the mission's over, right? Like, that's not going to feel good for anybody. I think that's going to lead to a bunch of feel bads. So yeah, I think the turn limit is probably a pretty big negative for me. But overall, I think this game is fantastic. I've probably talked more about the negatives, but like I said, I do feel like they are like a drop in the bucket compared to the good parts of this game. And I'm super excited to play this game. I am super excited to make aliens for it, make my team for it, stuff like that. I think it's really, really cool. But my face hurts like a motherfucker. It really hurts. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to call it. Thank you guys for listening to me talk about Majestic13 and about, what I'm excited to play with it and stuff. I am going to try to have my team done for next weekend. Fingers crossed. I've got 5 guys and an alien to paint. I think I can do that. So we're going to hopefully get a game of this in. So I think it's pretty darn cool. But I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to call it there. Thank you guys for watching. And